Sunil Sharma, the political commentator, host of The Rational Voices with Sunil. Sunil, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Another bad week for Keir Starmer. He's this morning asking people in Palestine to stop killing Israelis and to stop rewarding people for killing Israelis. You think he might have thought about that before he granted them nation status?
I mean, if Keir Starmer cared about the UK half as much as he cares about Palestine, I think we would have our golden age right now. I mean, he's obsessed with talking about international matters that do absolutely nothing to the United Kingdom. And to think that he thinks, or his government think, that his words have any kind of weight in the international settings is embarrassing. I don't think anyone really seriously looks at the UK with him as a leader and him making any announcements of any countries very seriously. I think the more depressing and worrying thing is what that'll mean for the UK in terms of already seeing that, putting up a Union Jack flag is far right. I expect the amount of Palestine flags to basically triple now in the UK. And I think it sets like a dangerous precedent, because what about Kosovo? What about Taiwan? What about there's so many examples of this where the question marks about when you're declaring another country its own sovereign state. So to me, it's a really bizarre to see him do that to record that video and him to talk so much about Palestine.
Yeah.
Why won't you talk about the United Kingdom? Why won't you talk about the mess that's going on in this country?
Well, exactly right. And I think Donald Trump later on today is going to react to this kind of outpouring of recognition. President Macron did it in France yesterday. Portugal have done it. Loads of other countries have done it. But it's mostly these kind of woke leaders like Mark Carney in Canada. And it appears to make really no difference at all, other than encouraging Hamas to say that they believe that they've won a great victory, because before October the 7th of 2023, nobody was recognising them as a state, and now everybody is.
But you look at all those countries you just named there, and all the ones that have come out and recognise Palestine, all of them are failing countries, all of them are failing economies, all of them are failing on mass migration. All of those countries are in decline in respect to the rest of the world, and it just why they're in decline. The focus on other countries on issues that they don't fully understand. That I don't think anyone, this is a conflict that's gone on for centuries and probably will carry on, unfortunately, for long periods of time. But these countries are almost trying to hide behind their own country, their own issues in their own countries by focusing outside. And I think it's really sad. And if they haven't learned from this globalist focus, there just doesn't seem to be any kind of recognition that this is not what the public want. This is not what the public cares about. But maybe in their small bubbles, in their small circles, they see this as a really, really big issue for them. But the reality is France, Canada, UK, the leaders of these countries don't have the best interests of their own people. And I think that's right.
No, and there's no question, is there, that some of the problems that are facing all of those same countries, because of the fact that they're reacting to a particular kind of a portion of their supporters, shall we say, have that portion of supporters, not because they're all flaming lefties, but because quite often they've got people in the country who have come from Palestine or who have come from Palestinian supporting countries to live here, and who are now pressurising the government to do their will, effectively.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the questions, I heard at the start something talking about Nigel Farage and his plans to, stop the impacts of mass migration. These are conversations that we should be having. These are conversations we should be really talking about: the economic impacts that illegal immigration has had, then the economic impacts of legal immigration. We should be having serious conversations about how do we close our borders quicker? Why has our numbers changed the way they have? What impact has that had to communities? These are the serious conversations we should be having as a country. We should not be getting involved in international matters that I just can't for a second really believe that Keir Starmer has any understanding of what's going on in that region or what goes on a day-to-day basis. And I think he doesn't know what goes on in his own backyard. What makes anyone think that he knows what goes on outside? And I think that's the concerning thing. There are some serious issues, again, when we particularly talk about mass migration, and these are questions that we should be discussing and debating about.
Yeah, well, we'll come back to what Nigel Farage was saying yesterday about how he wants to save £230 billion off the top of the public purse because of all of the money that's going out in benefits to foreign nationals and people who've come here from abroad. But let's just move before we do that, to this story about Keir Starmer and his controversial Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. This is a story that's not going away. He's been accused of breaking Commons rules over his relationship. The code of conduct in terms of their past support, getting Labour Together's think tank money, which has disappeared and not been accounted for. You know, this was a story that was broken over the weekend in the Mail on Sunday. Labour Together basically somehow hid more than £700,000 in donations while they were trying to build up Keir Starmer so that he could take over from Jeremy Corbyn. And it's a very, very murky looking story, this, to me.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised. I think what makes it so much worse for Sir Keir Starmer and anyone in that Labour government is the way they attacked Boris Johnson, the way they attacked even people like Jeremy Hunt throughout the last 10, 15 years. This kind of one rule for them, one rule for us, when all along they've been playing, well, it looks like to me, the exact same game. And I think that's what makes it even the situation so much more worse, because they've literally said so much things about this sort of murky behaviour, you know, the getting rid of the sleeves in 10 Downing Street, when they've just replaced sleeves with even more sleeves. And I think it's really I just with Keir Starmer, maybe I just don't see him having the knowledge or the capacity to really be able to play this sort of game of hiding donations and all this sort of stuff. I'm sure it's other people within that party, within his team, within his profile, because when I look at that man and I see him on the international stage, I see nothing. So I find it hard to believe that he's necessarily done it.
He may not be clever enough to be the man that orchestrated it, but he was certainly the beneficiary of it, you know, and therefore, you know, they all have to, I'm afraid, sup from the same bowl, if you like, you know. Definitely. And it may well be that they keep things from Starmer because he's too stupid to understand it. However, he was the beneficiary of, and 700,000 quid's an awful lot of money.
Definitely. I mean, again, it raises the questions. You know, these are the exact same questions that Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour cabinet were badgering the Tories for how many years about donations, about where does the money come from, all this sort of stuff. They were the ones who really, really set that whole one rule for them, one rule for us, that kind of mentality, and they've been doing it all along. And I think that kind of sums up the hypocrisy. It sums up the state of the Labour Party right now. And I think that's why we're talking so much about Nigel Farage and everyone else, is because there is a real appetite for something different. These people, in my opinion, do not serve the interests of the UK. They serve the globalists, they serve the elites, they serve their paymasters at Brussels. Far happier, you know, helping Brussels than he is Britain, and I don't think that's a remotely controversial thing to say.
I don't think so at all. Let's have a look at what Nigel Farage said about scrapping indefinite leave to remain yesterday. We'll get that for you in a moment, because he says that he can save £230 billion, right, as a result of taking these people out of that particular category, right? Let's have a look.
We will abolish indefinite leave to remain as a category in this country. The 800,000 people that will get indefinite leave to remain unless this policy is revoked tend to be young, tend to be low-skilled. They are going to be a huge burden on the state. What we do know is that 1 in 6 claimants of universal credit alone today, 1 in 6 is a foreign-born national.
And when you think of the numbers of people in the population as a whole, 1 in 6 is a massive number, isn't it? Because that would be, if you were, you know, going to extrapolate that into the numbers, say, for example, in the country, you'd be looking at 10 million plus people who are from foreign countries claiming universal credit.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is, I think something has to be done, and it needs to be radical, because the reality is, you look at the numbers in the UK when it comes to mass migration, how much it's changed in the last 10, 20 years. It is astronomical. It's not sustainable, and I think there needs to be serious change. And I think something like this is a step in the right direction. You've got to remember, we've moved away from 60s and the 70s and 80s where mass migration was around 10, 20,000. We're now talking hundreds of thousands, and I think that is an unsustainable amount of people. It's changing the culture. It's changing the fabric of this country. And I think if you can find ways or measures to remove people the quickest and succinct way, then I think that should be something that we should really be applauding. There are more than 5 million people in the UK that are economically inactive. These are people who are not even looking for jobs, they're not on the unemployment rate, which I think Sir Keir Starmer loves to talk about. But the reality is there's 5 million people who are, more than 5 million people who are economically inactive. They should be the focus. We should be looking to get those people into the workforce. These are British-born people who are not working, and we need to be getting those people to be working rather rather than spending the amount of money we spend on, in particular, illegal migrants, but even some of the indefinite remain. These are loopholes that need to be closed.
Right. Because obviously the other main overarching conversation is about the fact that this country is pretty much out of money. You know, we've got Rachel Reeves talking about possibly having to raise income tax by 2p, the Resolution Foundation making recommendations to fill the budget black hole by just going after people, people's pensions, people's income, people's wages, you know, people who are not employees, which is an awful lot of people in this country who are self-employed, who are, you know, entrepreneurs, who are landlords, people who generate an awful lot of money for this country and who generate an awful lot of tax for this country. The Labour answer is simply to tax them more.
Well, the few that are left are going to keep on leaving with what she's doing. If you're a budding entrepreneur, I don't, unfortunately, I don't see why you would want to start your business in the UK with this current government and this current climate of what they're doing. And I think, you know, we talk about the financial repercussions. This immigration, why it's such a big subject, is because it affects every single aspect of what's going on in the UK. You take prisons, you know, more than 10,000 are foreign criminals in our prisons, and that's more than 10% of people that are in prison are from foreign nationals.
Yeah.
How easy would it be to just deport those people straight away? We keep talking about the UK has a prison crisis and that they are under-resourced, or they've got all sorts of issues. You remove those 10,000 people straight off the bat, that is a massive relief on prisons. You can go to any aspect of what's going on right now in the United Kingdom and there is some link to mass migration, and that's just the reality. It's not like I say, I think people are the few that don't quite get this, the circumstances from 20, 30, 40 years ago is completely different to now. We don't have labour shortages. We have the opposite problem where we don't actually have enough people in the labour workforce, and unfortunately a massive reason for that is mass migration, is those people accepting extremely low wages when the normal average working Brit can't get a job, they can't get a house. It's a terrible situation, and I think this Labour Party unfortunately just doesn't seem to understand this. It rather prioritises the impacts of people foreign to the country than the people actually in the country who are born and bred in this country, and I think that's really, really depressing, and that's why I think Farage's ideas here are a really big, good step in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's why people are frightened of it, because it looks like it's going to be as popular as every other policy that he's come out with. Sunil, thanks very much indeed. Sunil